So Logan Paul, who is professedly known as someone who you would say is a anti-Christian or anti-religion, maybe. Well, depending on who you ask, right? But in this episode, we're gonna check out a video from Logan Paul on his podcast on Impulsive, and Cliff Knechtle and Stuart Knechtle, who have been going viral and are very, very profound in apologetics. I think the way Cliff does this manner of speaking to Logan Paul while actually stating the facts comes across as very, very sincere. All right, here it is. Check this out.
Guess what I am looking for and what I have always struggled with is like the proof per se. Like I haven't really had like a come to Jesus moment that I know some people have had. I haven't had and have abided by the guidance of the Bible to lead me to like a happy, successful place in my life. I just try to be a good person. I try to work hard and I try to love the people around me as much as I can. And by the way, I f up a lot, but I guess like I started by saying I'm just like unwilling to subscribe to a religion because then I guess this leads into this conversation. Why Christianity? There's so many denominations out there. And to be able to like put your foot down on one, especially when they all have such positive teachings for the most part, it's just so hard for me. I just don't know if I'm willing to make that assertion just yet. So why Christianity is the question.
All right. First of all, you're right. I can't prove God.
So watch how Cliff answers this question. And there's a Bible verse that will tie into this at the very end. All right.
But Logan, I think you've got God bearing down hard on you through your mom. I think it's real clear that your mom loves you.
Is that true, Ma? She's holding the cross. Can you at least get a thumbs up or something? She just holds up the cross. She's like, can't discuss the love of Logan. But here's a cross. I do love Jesus.
I don't think that your mom's love for you is simply a chemical reaction. I think your mom has made a decision over your entire life to care for you, to provide for you, to protect you, to sacrifice for you. That is far beyond an animal instinct. That is a free decision your precious mother has made to really love you, to really care for you. Love, the experience of love, points us to reality, including some type of God. Okay, then the next question is, yeah, but who is this God? And that's where Jesus Christ, Muhammad, Confucius, Buddhists, all the avatars of Hinduism come in, all claiming to be revealing God accurately. But the historical evidence is Jesus lived a sinless life. He never sinned once.
All right, here he goes.
On chapter 8, he could look into the faces of his enemies and say, which one of you can prove me guilty of sin? And his enemies were silent. Secondly, he taught amazing ethical teachings that I think all of us respect highly. The Sermon on the Mount is obviously ethical genius, all right? Profound ethical genius. The Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapters 5, 6, and 7. So his lifestyle, his ethical teachings demand respect. Thirdly, you watch him die. At the moment of his most excruciating pain and agony, nailed to a wooden crossbeam, instead of cursing his enemies the way I would have, he prays, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Well, my respect for him.
All right, so the one thing I wanted to add is there's an account, right? So if you read The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel, there's actually a point because Jesus appears to plenty of people, right after his death and resurrection. And it's obviously according to scripture, we have around 500 eyewitnesses that they saw him after he was crucified. 500 witnesses. Say in most cases, right? In let's say a murder case, even before in times, right? When we read, we're lucky to have one or two eyewitnesses of even three of say cases, murders, things like that, right? 500 people were the ones that claimed to have seen Jesus right after.
I would have. He prays, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Well, my respect for him skyrockets. But fourthly, and most importantly, 3 days after he dies, he physically, bodily rises from the dead. And over a period of 40 days, he appears to over 500 people who see him, different times, different places, risen from the dead. Paul records in 1 Corinthians 15.
I have a question. How do you know that?
You know that in the same way that you know that George Washington was
This is where it gets really good.
first president of the United States, that you know that Adolf Hitler really committed the atrocities he did. It's called historical knowledge.
But those recent events those events you just cited happened much more recently.
Yes.
And are much more well documented than potentially 2,000 years of lost history.
Bingo, correct. But the great news is, in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, we have a very, very reliable.
Now, this is what many people don't know, which is to me is mind-blowing when they try to disprove the existence of God, right? But check out the evidence that we actually have, the manuscripts for the Bible. It's gonna shock you.
Historical record based on over 5,800 Greek manuscripts, 10,000 manuscripts in the Latin Vulgate, and about 9,800 in Ethiopic, Coptic, Armenian, Syriac, Gothic, and Slavic.
Basically, like they were almost approved and given credibility to in the short term thereafter, and that added a more extensive proof to the story back then.
Essentially, they were like corroborated.
Yeah, that's
evidence.
That's kind of what I want to ask a quick question about that. And you brought up George Washington and the atrocities of World War II. We live in a place, or a time and place right now, specifically in this moment, where the things that happened yesterday aren't even believed to necessarily be true. They're questioned. We live in a very strange place where there's been this infection of question everything to no end. And maybe it's an infection, and maybe you'll say otherwise. Like, I've seen you even do this exercise before, like on George Jenko's show. Are we even sitting here right now? You know, like, and you didn't ask it in saying like we're not, but like how far can this go, right?
You bet.
And so do you feel like that modern day questioning, that, to be honest with you, is somewhat of it seems like an ego boost almost for the person questioning whatever they're questioning. Like, look, I can question this. I must be so woke and amazing, right? And such a free thinker. Exactly. Do you think that's increasing the scrutiny on religious beliefs?
Yeah, we just had this big debate at Mississippi State in a lecture hall that went kind of crazy in there. And this guy stands up and tries to poke fun at Christianity, saying, you guys live in a culture of certainty. We live in a culture of free thinking and uncertainty. And you guys are bastardizing all different forms of knowledge by claiming this type of certainty. What he doesn't get is Christianity is all about doubt. Like, if any Christian comes up to you and says, you got to have certainty, or you're not going to heaven, you're going to burn in the lake of fire. That's just a total joke. Like, the man after God's own heart, David, was questioning God all the time. Job, when he was going through suffering, questioning God
all the time. Like, there's been so many times where I've had so many doubts too, right? But obviously, looking at the evidence of my faith now, I don't have as many doubts. But I'm not going to sit up here and pretend that I don't have doubts every now and then. Sometimes I'm even like, am I actually like, what if I'm wrong? What if everything that I think to be true is wrong, right? But even if that were the case, which is not, Brett, the principles of Christianity to live by are much better than any other principles in any other religion and any other relationship. Because you can't have other relationships with other gods except in other religions, except our Lord Jesus Christ. David doubted all the time. I've doubted. The disciples doubted. How much more am I going to doubt if they doubted, right? And it's never going to be about certainty, because it isn't. But we have our faith to prove it.
all the time. Oh, doubting Thomas. Jesus said, don't doubt, obviously, because doubting Thomas was scolded. No, doubting Thomas had all the disciples who claimed eyewitness testimony to the resurrection coming to him, telling him exactly what happened. Finally, Jesus actually gives him the physical proof, says, touch the actual nail prints in my hands, thrust your hand into the spear wound in my side, then stop doubting and believe. So eventually he calls him out of his doubt. But to your good point, I've doubted more than my brothers all life long. And my 3-year-old daughter the other day was like, I don't believe in God. Like, I can't see, touch, taste. I'm like, you're 3. What is going on here? It's so in the genes. I just hate it.
You just took a bite of Play-Doh.
Exactly. I can answer this. And so I love that about the Christian faith, unlike other faiths, which is, yeah.
So, but it sounds like this person that you were going back and forth with is talking about your certainty in the belief of Jesus, that he existed. That's what it sounds like. And I guess that's kind of was my question as well. Like how do you know? Is because the preservation of history is, excuse me, freaking difficult. That's extremely difficult, by the way. History is often written by the victors, right? And I don't know who the victor is in this case, but like we have lost thousands of years of history to, I don't know, destruction, fire, torment, collapse, war, rage, rain. And so the further back we go, it is harder for me to put my seal of belief on something if I don't have a certain amount of evidence. Like I'm one of those, and I'm not like, I'm just doubting. I'm not saying yes or no. I'm just asking questions. And eyewitness testimony seems to be like the strongest actual receipt of these events that took place in years 0, by the way, right? This I want to talk about that, pin that question. But yeah, you have a tremendous amount of faith in eyewitness testimony and the preservation of the records that contributed towards this story of Jesus Christ. Correct.
As well as Muhammad. If you tell me Muhammad never existed, I'm going to look you in the face and say, I'm sorry. The historical evidence is Muhammad was born about 570 AD and died about 632 AD.
What Muhammad claimed to be a messenger of God?
Prophet of God.
Prophet of God.
Mhm.
Do you not believe in that God? Allah, I'd assume?
When you read the Quran, there are good reasons to question the total reliability of Muhammad. So therefore, I don't trust him too much. I have great respect for Muhammad in the way he taught give alms to the poor. I think that's tremendous. Muhammad had more respect for Jesus than the typical American does. Muhammad believed that Jesus was born of a virgin, that he ascended to heaven, he lived a sinless life, he's coming back a second time. Wow. But Muhammad did not subscribe to the deity of Christ, that Christ is actually God in human form.
So
All right. So after that, they go into other topics such as abortion. They go back into what do people go to hell, things like that go out throughout the entire podcast. So I really recommend it, guys, if you want to check it out. And I think it's important to also take notes from Cliff and his son, just because the way they approach Logan and Mike is very, very graceful, very, very sincere, which is our approach. That should be the way for us as Christians, right? There's a book I'm reading currently called How to Tell the Truth by Preston Perry. And it talks about not just winning arguments, but winning hearts. Because at the end of the day, that's what it is. So I have a Bible verse that's going to tie this together in a way, okay? So bear with me here. In John chapter 9, right? So Jesus heals the man that was born blind, right? And he gets the mud, spits in his mouth, and puts it over his eyes. So the Pharisees start to question him. They start to question the man who was blind, right? And they keep asking him questions and questions, and they're not believing him. But check what he says, right? He says in verse 25, he replied, "Whether he is a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I do know is I was blind, but now I see." So essentially, this is what I'm trying to get at, right? Many, many people want the hardcore evidence, right? But a lot of it sometimes is just our living testimonies, right? He said, whether or not he is a sinner, I don't know. But I can tell you this, I was one way, right? I was blind, but now I see. So sometimes we can't even argue everything, because at the end of the day, our own living testimonies, our transformations is the evidence that Jesus exists. And for many people, that's not enough. And that's okay. That's why we have other things such as historical records, documents, things of that nature. But at the end of the day, it's the person that's changed, and it's the living testimony that proves that Jesus exists. All right. I'll see y'all on the next one. Later.